Hello and welcome to English in Advance. My name is Jessica and I am so glad you've decided to join me today. This is the place for you if you are ready to move beyond the textbook and step into the world of real, natural, and confident English. Have you ever felt stuck? I mean really stuck. You've reached a high level in your English. You can understand news reports, you can read articles, and you can have conversations. But there's a gap. You feel it when you're with a group of native speakers, and the jokes fly by just a little too fast. You feel it when you're watching a movie without subtitles, and you catch the plot. But you miss the personality, the little details that make the dialogue sparkle. And most of all, you feel it when you want to express a complex idea, a deep feeling, or a funny story of your own, and the words just don't flow with the same ease and color as they do in your native language. This gap, this plateau, is what we call the C1 level challenge. It's the difference between knowing English and truly living in it. Today, we are going to bridge that gap. This isn't about learning more vocabulary lists or grammar rules. You already have a strong foundation. This is about retuning your ears and unlocking your voice. We're going on a journey together through stories and practice to transform your listening from passive understanding to active engagement, and to boost your speaking from careful construction to spontaneous fluency. So get comfortable, relax your mind, and let's begin. I want to start with a story about my friend, Michael. Michael is a brilliant software engineer. He's one of the smartest people I know. A few years ago, he was interviewing for his dream job at a major tech company in San Francisco. He had prepared for weeks. He knew all the technical answers, he had practiced his responses to common questions, and his English, on paper, was perfect. He walked into the interview feeling confident. The first part of the interview went great. He solved coding problems on the whiteboard with ease. Then came the part he was nervous about. The behavioral interview with the hiring manager, a woman named Sarah. Sarah started with a simple question. She leaned back in her chair, smiled, and asked, "So, Michael, tell me about a time you had to, shall we say, navigate some tricky office politics." Michael froze for a second. His mind raced. Tricky office politics? What does she mean? Does she think I am a political person? Is this a trick question? He understood all the words. Navigate, tricky, office politics. But the way she said it, shall we say, it felt like a code. It was a signal that this wasn't a straightforward question. It invited a story of social intelligence, not just technical problem solving. He had prepared for, "Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker." This felt different. It felt softer, more subtle. He gave a standard textbook answer about a disagreement over a project deadline and how he resolved it logically by creating a shared spreadsheet. His answer was correct, but it was dry. It had no soul. Sarah nodded slowly, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She then asked another one. "What would your previous manager say is an area where you could stand to grow a little?" Again, the language was so indirect. Stand to grow a little. It's a very gentle, very American corporate way of saying, "What is your biggest weakness?" Michael gave another prepared, safe answer. He said, "I sometimes get too focused on the details, but I'm learning to see the bigger picture." It was the answer from 100 different career advice websites. Sarah tried one more time to get to know the real Michael. She asked, Tell me about a project that didn't go as planned. What was your takeaway from that experience? Michael's mind immediately went to a project that had been a complete disaster, but he was afraid to sound like a failure, so he chose a very minor issue, a project that was only a day late, and explained how he fixed it. He presented himself as perfect, as someone who never truly fails. He didn't get the job. When he asked for feedback, the recruiter was kind but direct. They said he was technically brilliant, but they felt he didn't really open up. They weren't sure if he would be a good cultural fit. Michael was crushed. He had all the right answers, but he failed the conversation. What happened here? Michael was listening to the words, but he wasn't listening to the music of the language. At the C1 level, communication is not just about the dictionary definition of words. It's about understanding nuance, subtext, and register. Sarah was using a very common professional American register. It's indirect, polite, and uses soft language to ask hard questions. Phrases like, shall we say, or stand to grow are signals. They signal that we are entering a delicate area, and they invite a response that is equally thoughtful and self-aware, not just a prepackaged answer. When she asked about a project that didn't go as planned, she wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for humility, self-awareness, and the ability to learn from mistakes. A better answer would have been an honest story about a real failure, focusing not on the failure itself, but on what he learned from it. That's the takeaway she was asking for. Let's break this down. The question, tell me about a time you had to navigate some tricky office politics, is really asking, can you handle difficult social situations with intelligence and grace? Are you a team player, or do you create drama? A better answer would have started with acknowledging the nuance. Michael could have said, that's a great question. Office dynamics can certainly be complex. This shows he understands the real question behind the question. Then he could have told a brief story with a little more personality, showing his thought process, not just the result. Here's a little practice for you. I'm going to give you a soft or indirect professional question, just like Sarah's. I want you to pause and think about what the real question is. What is the listener really trying to find out about you? Ready? Here it is. How would you handle a situation where a key project you're on is, let's just say, not exactly on track for success? So what is the real question? It's not just, what do you do when a project is failing? The real questions are, do you panic under pressure? Do you blame others? Are you proactive and solution-oriented? Can you communicate bad news effectively? A C1 level response isn't, I would work harder. It's, my first step would be to reevaluate the project goals and resources to understand exactly why we're off track. Then I'd communicate a clear, honest assessment to my team and manager, focusing on potential solutions rather than just the problems. Can you hear the difference? It's confident, it's proactive, and it shows you understand the business context. This kind of listening, a kind of professional empathy, is a cornerstone of fluency. This brings me to another story, this one about a completely different kind of listening. It involves me, my couch, and a bag of popcorn. A few years back, my friends and I decided to have a movie night. They chose a fast-talking, witty comedy full of cultural references. I was the only non-native speaker in the room, though my friends often forgot that. I thought to myself, no problem. My listening is advanced. I've got this. The movie started, and within 5 minutes, I was lost. The characters spoke at 1,000,000 miles an hour. They used slang I had never heard. They interrupted each other. Their words seemed to blend together into one long, confusing sound. My friends were roaring with laughter, and I was sitting there, smiling and nodding, pretending I understood. It was an exhausting 90 minutes of pretending. I understood the main plot. Boy meets girl, something funny happens. They live happily ever after. But I missed everything that made the movie special. The clever wordplay, the sarcastic asides, the cultural jokes, they all flew right over my head. That experience taught me a valuable lesson. Understanding English in a controlled environment, like a classroom or a news broadcast, is one thing. Understanding it in the wild, that's a completely different skill. The key is understanding connected speech. Native speakers don't pronounce every single word clearly and separately. We link words together. We change sounds. We drop sounds. It's what makes the language flow, but it can be a nightmare for learners. For example, a character in the movie might have said, "What are you going to do?" But it probably sounded like, "What you gonna do?" The T in what and the Y in you blend to make a key sound. Going to becomes gonna. This isn't lazy English, it's normal, everyday, fluent English. Here's another one. I should have called him. In a movie, you'd likely hear, "I should have called him." The have gets reduced to just the. The H in him disappears and it all links together. Should have called him. The only way to get good at hearing this is to practice with a special technique called shadowing. Shadowing is simple but incredibly powerful. You listen to a short piece of audio, just a few seconds, and you repeat it at the exact same time, trying to mimic the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation perfectly. You become their shadow. Let's try it right now. I'm going to say a short sentence. I want you to try and repeat it exactly as I say it, paying attention to the linked sounds. Ready? I'm going to ask him if he wants to get a cup of coffee. A little fast? Let's break it down. Gonna for going to. Ask him becomes ask him. The H is gone. Wants to becomes wantsta. Get a becomes getta. So the whole sentence sounds more like, I'm going to ask him if he wants to get a cup of coffee. Let's try it again. I'll say it and you be my echo. I'm going to ask him if he wants to get a cup of coffee. How did that feel? A little strange at first, right? But by doing this, you are training your mouth to make the sounds of fluent English, and you are training your ear to hear them. You start to recognize these patterns everywhere. Find a short scene from a movie or a TV show you like. Something with natural dialogue. Listen to one line. Pause. Repeat it. Try to match the melody of the sentence. Do this for just 5 minutes a day. You will be amazed at how quickly your listening and your accent begin to improve. You'll stop translating word by word and start hearing the music of the language. Speaking of music, the intonation, the rise and fall of our voice, is another crucial layer of meaning that C1 learners need to master. And I have a funny story about that. Last year, I was on the phone with my cable company. It was one of those classic, frustrating customer service calls. I was trying to explain that I had been overcharged on my bill. The man on the other end of the line, let's call him Frank, had a very flat, monotone voice. I explained my problem clearly. "Hi, Frank, my bill this month is $20 higher than it should be. I think there's been a mistake." And Frank replied in a perfectly flat voice, "I see that you signed up for the premium package." Now, on paper, that sentence is just a statement of fact, but I needed to know if he was accusing me, helping me, or just reading his screen. The meaning was hidden in the intonation, or, in this case, the lack of it. I tried again, a little more forcefully. "Yes, but I was told the premium package was a free trial for 1 month. This is the 2nd month, and I've been charged." Frank replied, again totally flat. "The trial ended on the 5th of the month." I was getting frustrated. Was he being difficult on purpose? Was he just bored? I couldn't read the situation. Finally, in desperation, I changed my own intonation. I used a high, rising tone at the end of my sentence, the kind we use for questions. I said, "So, you're telling me there's nothing you can do?" The silence on the other end of the line was telling. Then his tone shifted slightly. For the first time, there was a little life in his voice. "Well, let me see if there's a promotion I can apply." He had been in automatic mode, just reading his script. My change in intonation, a sound of genuine confusion and appeal, broke through his script. I had used the music of English to change the direction of the conversation. Intonation is like the punctuation of spoken English. A rising intonation at the end of a statement can turn it into a question. For example, "You're coming to the party." That's a statement. But, "You're coming to the party?" With a rising tone? Now it's a question, and it also implies a little surprise. Stress is also part of this music. We emphasize certain words in a sentence to show what is most important. Think about the simple sentence, "I didn't say he stole the money." Let's play with the stress. If I say, "I didn't say he stole the money," what does that mean? It means someone else said it, but not me. Now, what if I say, "I didn't say he stole the money"? What's the implication now? Maybe I wrote it, or I implied it, but I didn't say the words out loud. Let's try one more. "I didn't say he stole the money." What does that mean? It means he stole something else. Maybe the jewelry, but not the money. See how powerful that is? One simple sentence can have multiple meanings, all controlled by which word you emphasize. This is something you can't learn from a grammar book. You learn it by listening, actively listening, to how people use their voices. Here's your practice. I want you to find a short audio clip of a conversation. It could be from a podcast, a YouTube video, anything with 2 people talking. Close your eyes and just listen to the melody. Don't worry about the words. Can you hear when their voices go up and down? Can you hear which words they are punching or emphasizing? Can you guess their emotions? Are they excited, bored, angry, curious? Just from the sound of their voices, this is training your ear for the emotional subtext of English, which is a massive part of fluency. After you listen for the music, then listen again for the words. You'll find you understand so much more. Now let's move from understanding emotion to understanding humor. Humor is often one of the last frontiers for language learners. It's so tied to culture, wordplay, and timing. I learned this lesson the hard way from my friend Chloe, who decided to try stand-up comedy. She was naturally funny, and she spent weeks writing her routine. The night of her first performance, a group of us went to support her at a small comedy club in Austin, Texas. Chloe walked on stage, looking nervous but excited. She told her first joke. It was about a funny experience she had at the supermarket. It was a well-structured joke with a setup and a punchline. But only a few people chuckled politely. She moved on to her next joke and the next. The response was the same. A few weak laughs, but mostly silence. It was painful to watch. She was bombing. After her set, she was completely defeated. "I don't get it," she said. "These are my best jokes. They're funny." And she was right, they were. The problem wasn't the jokes themselves. The problem was her delivery. She was so nervous that she rushed through her material. She didn't pause. She delivered every line with the same rhythm. She didn't give the audience time to process the setup before she hit them with the punchline. There was no timing, no suspense. A few weeks later, after some coaching from a veteran comedian, she tried again. This time, she was transformed. She walked on stage, looked at the audience, and just waited. She let the silence build for a moment. She told the exact same jokes, but this time, she took her time. She would say the setup, and then she would pause, just for a beat, letting the tension build. Then she would deliver the punchline. The difference was incredible. The room exploded with laughter. She had learned that in comedy, the silence between the words is just as important as the words themselves. The pauses, the rhythm, the timing. That's where the humor lives. This is true for all speaking, not just comedy. Advanced speakers use pauses for effect. They use them to hold attention, to emphasize a point, or to give the listener a moment to think. Learners are often afraid of silence. They feel like they need to fill every second with words, so they rush. But fluency isn't about speaking fast. It's about speaking with control and intention. Think about how a great storyteller tells a story. They don't just list the facts. They build a world. They might say, "It was a dark and stormy night." Then pause. "The wind was howling through the trees." Another pause. And then, "I heard a sound." The pauses create suspense. They pull you in. Here's a practice exercise for you to work on your own timing. It's called the storytelling pause. Take a simple story, maybe a fairy tale you know, or a simple anecdote about your day. Record yourself telling the story on your phone. First, tell it without thinking about it, just say the words. Then listen back. Now, record it a second time. This time, consciously add pauses. Before you reveal an important piece of information, pause. After you say something dramatic, pause. Use silence as a tool. When you listen back to the second recording, I guarantee it will sound more engaging, more confident, and more fluent. You are learning to control the rhythm of your own speech. Of course, not all conversations are as controlled as telling a story. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations that are much more dynamic and unpredictable. This reminds me of a trip I took to a huge flea market in Brooklyn, New York. I love flea markets. I love the thrill of the hunt, searching for a unique treasure. On this particular day, I saw a beautiful old leather-bound book. I knew my dad, who is an avid reader, would love it. I walked up to the vendor, a grizzled old man with a friendly smile. "How much for the book?" I asked. He looked at the book, then at me, and said, "For you, $50. I knew the first price was just a starting point. This was a negotiation. This was a dance. So I replied, "Oh, wow. That's a little more than I was hoping to spend." Notice what I did there. I didn't say, "That's too expensive." That can sound a little confrontational. I used hesitation devices and filler words. "Oh, wow. That's a little more." These little words are not mistakes. They are essential tools in natural conversation. They soften your statements. They buy you time to think, and they make you sound more natural and less like a robot. The vendor replied, "It's a first edition. Very rare. Look at the binding." I picked up the book and examined it. I said, I see. It's in beautiful condition, but, well, there's a little bit of damage on the spine here, and a few of the pages are stained. Again, well. These are not empty sounds. They signal that I am considering his point, but I also have a counterpoint. It keeps the conversation collaborative, not combative. He could see I appreciated the book, but I was also a smart buyer. He countered, Okay, it's an old book. It's got character. I'll tell you what, because I like you, 45. Now it was my turn to make a real offer. I said, I really appreciate that. It's a beautiful book. Would you consider 30? This is a key negotiation tactic. I complimented the item and the vendor before making my lower offer. It shows respect. He laughed a little. 30. You're killing me. I can't do 30. How about we meet in the middle? 40? We went back and forth for a few more minutes. I used phrases like, I'm not sure I can go that high, and what's the absolute best you can do for me? In the end, we agreed on $35. We both got what we wanted. I got a wonderful gift for my dad, and he made a sale. We shook hands, and we were both smiling. It was a successful negotiation, not because I was aggressive, but because I used the right kind of language. I used fillers to sound thoughtful. I used softening phrases to be polite, and I used questioning intonation to make proposals instead of demands. Many English learners are taught to avoid fillers like, and you know. And it's true. Overusing them can make you sound unsure of yourself, but using them strategically, just as native speakers do, is a key sign of fluency. They are the little bits of oil that keep the engine of conversation running smoothly. So, here's your practice. The next time you are speaking English, try to consciously use one or two of these fillers. When someone asks you a question, instead of rushing to answer, start with, that's an interesting question. Let me think. It gives you a moment to prepare your answer, and it makes you sound thoughtful and engaged. Or if you are expressing an opinion, you could soften it by saying, well, from my perspective, or I kind of feel that. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of conversational intelligence. Speaking of conversational intelligence, let me tell you about a situation that requires a lot of it, a networking event. A while ago, I had to attend a large conference for my work. The evenings were filled with these networking events, where hundreds of people stand in a large room, balancing a drink and a small plate of food, trying to make professional connections. For many people, and especially for language learners, these events are terrifying. The pressure to be interesting, to start conversations with strangers, it's intense. I remember watching my friend, an English learner named Javier, struggle at one of these events. He would walk up to a person, say, "Hello, I am Javier," and then stand there waiting for the other person to lead the conversation. The conversations were often short and awkward. He wasn't making any real connections. I gave him a piece of advice. I told him to stop trying to be interesting and start trying to be interested. The key to small talk is not talking about yourself. It's asking good questions. Not just yes or no questions, but open-ended questions that invite the other person to share something about themselves. questions that start with what, how, or why. So Javier tried a new strategy. He approached a woman, and instead of just introducing himself, he said, "Hi, I'm Javier." That was a really interesting talk on marketing today. What did you think was the most surprising part? Instantly, the dynamic changed. The woman's eyes lit up, and she started sharing her opinion. Javier just listened, nodded, and asked follow-up questions like, "Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that is?" Or, "How do you think that applies to your industry?" Within 5 minutes, he had learned about her job, her company, and her professional interests. He wasn't just having small talk, he was having a real conversation. He also learned the art of the graceful exit. Instead of just awkwardly walking away when the conversation came to a natural pause, he said, "Well, it was so great to meet you. I'm going to go grab another drink, but I'd love to connect on LinkedIn." It was smooth, polite, and it left the door open for future contact. Small talk is a skill, and it's a vital one in American professional culture. It's how connections are made and relationships are built. It's not about having deep, meaningful conversations. It's about showing curiosity, being a good listener, and building rapport. So let's practice. I want you to imagine you are at a networking event. You've just met someone. What are 3 open-ended questions you could ask them besides, "What do you do?" Yeah. Pause for a moment and think. You could ask, "What brings you to this event today?" Or, "What's been the most interesting thing you've learned so far?" Or even something more personal, like, "I see you're based in Chicago. How are you enjoying the city?" When? These questions open doors. They invite stories, not just answers. Mastering the art of small talk will make you feel so much more confident and fluent in any social or professional setting. Of course, conversational intelligence is really put to the test when the topic is a difficult one. I was at a dinner party once with a group of friends and acquaintances. The evening was going wonderfully, until someone brought up politics. Suddenly, the friendly, lighthearted atmosphere became tense. 2 people at the table, let's call them David and Maria, had completely opposite political views. David made a strong statement about a current event regarding economic policy. He said, "It's simple. We need to cut taxes to stimulate growth. Any other approach is just economically illiterate." He said it with such finality, as if it were a fact, not an opinion. Maria immediately disagreed. "I'm sorry, David." She started, "But I have to say, I see it completely differently. We've seen that those policies often increase inequality. A strong social safety net is what really creates a stable economy." Notice her opening phrase, "I'm sorry, but I have to say." This is a classic polite disagreement formula. The "I'm sorry" isn't a real apology. It's a social softener. It signals, "I am about to contradict you, but I want to keep this conversation respectful." David, however, was getting heated. He interrupted Maria mid-sentence. No, you're not listening to the facts. The data clearly shows." This is a common mistake in debates, and it's a conversation killer. Interrupting someone, especially with a phrase like, "You're not listening," is very aggressive. The conversation quickly went downhill. It became less of a discussion and more of a battle. But then another guest, a woman named Sarah, stepped in. She waited for a brief pause and then said, "David, I hear your point about the importance of stimulating the economy. And Maria, I understand your concern for how those policies affect everyone in society. It sounds like you're both passionate about finding the best outcome. I wonder if there's any common ground here at all. For example, can we agree that a healthy economy is one where most people have an opportunity to succeed? What Sarah did was brilliant. First, she validated both speakers. She showed she was listening by summarizing their core values. I hear your point about X. I understand your concern about Y. This makes people feel heard and de-escalates the tension. Second, she reframed the conversation. Instead of a fight about specific policies, she turned it into a search for shared values or common ground. She shifted the focus from conflict to collaboration. Her intervention completely changed the energy at the table. While David and Maria didn't magically agree, the conversation became civil and productive again. At the C1 level, fluency is about more than just expressing your own ideas. It's about being able to manage a conversation. It's knowing how to agree, how to disagree, how to interrupt politely, and how to steer a conversation away from conflict. Let's practice some of these phrases. Imagine a friend says something you strongly disagree with. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," what could you say? You could try, "I see what you're saying, but I have a slightly different perspective." Or, "That's one way to look at it. Have you considered ? These phrases show respect for the other speaker while still allowing you to state your own opinion clearly. Now, let's practice polite interruption. Sometimes you have to interrupt, but there's a good way and a bad way to do it. Instead of just starting to talk over someone, you can use a signal phrase. For example, "Could I just jump in here for a second?" Or, "If I could just add something quickly." These are signals that you have something important to say, but you are trying to be respectful of the person who is speaking. Try saying one of those out loud. "Could I just jump in here for a second?" It feels much more polite, doesn't it? Mastering these social phrases is a huge step towards sounding truly fluent and sophisticated in your English. This leads me to another related and often very difficult situation: giving and receiving feedback. In the American workplace, feedback is a constant, but it's rarely direct. It's usually wrapped in layers of polite, professional language. A few years ago, I had to give some difficult feedback to a junior colleague I was mentoring. Let's call him Sam. Sam was enthusiastic and hardworking, but his written reports were always full of small grammatical errors. I knew that if I just said, "Sam, your reports are full of mistakes," it would crush his confidence. I had to be more skillful, so I invited him for a coffee. I started the conversation with what's often called the sandwich method. You start with something positive, then give the criticism, then end with something positive. I started by saying, "Sam, your presentation yesterday was fantastic. The way you analyzed the data was really impressive." He smiled and I could see him relax. Then I moved to the difficult part. I said, "I'm wondering if we could brainstorm some ways to make your written reports just as powerful as your presentations. I've noticed a few small things with grammar and punctuation, which is something a lot of people struggle with. I thought maybe we could look at one together." Notice my language. I said, "I'm wondering if we could," which is a very soft suggestion, not a command. I framed it as a collaborative brainstorm. I minimized the problem by calling them a few small things, and I normalized it by saying it's something a lot of people struggle with. This depersonalizes the criticism. It's not, "You are bad at grammar." It's, "This is a common skill to work on." We then looked at his report, and I showed him a few examples and gave him some resources. I ended the conversation by saying, "I have no doubt that with your great ideas and a little polish on the writing, your reports are going to be top-notch. I'm really excited to see your next one." Giving feedback like this is a C1 level speaking skill. It requires empathy, strategic vocabulary, and an understanding of professional culture. Receiving feedback well is an equally important C1 listening skill. If your manager ever says to you, "I'd like to offer a few thoughts on your last project," your ears should perk up. That's code for, "I am about to give you some criticism." The key is to listen without getting defensive. Don't argue, just listen. Ask clarifying questions like, "Could you give me an example of what you mean?" And always end by saying, "Thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it." This shows you are professional, mature, and open to growth. Let's practice. Imagine you are a manager. You need to tell your employee that they are often late for meetings. You don't want to sound angry or accusatory. How could you phrase this feedback using soft, professional language? Pause and think about it. You could say something like, "Hi, Alex. Do you have a minute? I wanted to chat about our team meetings. It's really important for us to start on time so we can get through our agenda. I've noticed you've been running a few minutes late recently. Is everything okay?" This approach shows concern, explains the impact of the behavior, and opens a dialogue instead of just making an accusation. It's a powerful and fluent way to communicate. Now, let's shift gears from the lively, unpredictable world of conversation to the structured environment of academic listening. When I was in college, I had a history professor, Dr. Evans, who was absolutely brilliant. He was a world-renowned expert in his field. But listening to his lectures was incredibly difficult. He spoke in long, complex sentences. He used high-level academic vocabulary. And he would often go off on long tangents, telling stories that seemed unrelated to the topic. Many students struggled in his class. They would try to write down everything he said, and their notes would be a chaotic mess. I was struggling too, until I learned to listen differently. I realized I didn't need to understand every single word he said. I needed to understand the structure of his lecture. I started listening for what we call signposting language. These are the words and phrases a speaker uses to guide the listener, to show them the map of the conversation. For example, at the beginning of a lecture, Dr. Evans might say, "Today we are going to explore 3 main causes of the revolution. First, second, and finally." That's a huge signpost. It tells me exactly what to listen for. I would immediately structure my notes with 3 main sections. When he said first, I knew to start listening for the details of the first cause. When he was in the middle of a long story, I could relax a little, knowing it was a supporting detail, not the main point. He also used signposts to show relationships between ideas. He would use words like consequently or as a result to show cause and effect. He would use in contrast or on the other hand to show a different point of view. He would use to illustrate this point or for instance before giving an example. These words were like road signs telling me where the lecture was going. Once I started listening for these signposts, his lectures became crystal clear. I stopped trying to transcribe everything and started listening for the main ideas. My notes became more organized, and my understanding of the material skyrocketed. I learned that academic listening is a strategic game. It's about identifying the big picture and not getting lost in the details. This skill is essential, not just in university, but in many professional settings as well, like listening to a long presentation or a business meeting. So how can you practice this? Take any educational content, like a TED Talk or a documentary. Before you start, get a piece of paper and a pen. Your goal is not to write down everything. Your goal is to create an outline. Listen for the introduction. What is the speaker's main argument or topic? They will usually state it clearly at the beginning. Then, listen for those signposting words. First, second, next. In conclusion, listen for phrases that introduce examples or contrasts. Pause the video every few minutes and jot down just the main points. At the end, you should have a clear, simple outline of the entire talk. By practicing this, you are training yourself to be an active, strategic listener. You are learning to see the skeleton of the information, the structure that holds it all together. Of course, not all listening happens in formal settings. Some of the most valuable listening practice you can get is from simply being out in the world. I live in a big city, and I often take the subway to get around. One of my favorite things to do on the subway is to listen to the people around me. I know it's a little like eavesdropping, but I think of it as linguistic research. The conversations you overhear on a bus or a train are a gold mine for an advanced English learner. Why? Because they are 100% authentic and unscripted. People talk over each other. They use slang. They mumble. They leave sentences unfinished. They make inside jokes. It's messy. It's real. And it's the ultimate listening challenge. I remember one time I was listening to two teenage girls talking about their plans for the weekend. Their conversation went something like this. Girl 1. So, are you still down for Saturday? Girl 2. Totally, but my mom's being so extra about my chores. It's a whole thing, Cho. Girl 1. Ugh, I feel you. Mine too. Just be like, "'Kay, whatever," and then dip. Girl 2. For real. Now, a textbook would never teach you this kind of dialogue. Let's break it down. Down for Saturday just means, do you still want to do our plan on Saturday? My mom's being so extra means she's being overly dramatic or difficult. It's a whole thing is a vague phrase that means it's a complicated situation. I feel you means I understand and sympathize with you. Mine too is a shortened form of my mom is too. Be like, "'Kay, whatever," means just say, "Okay, whatever." And dip is slang for leave. For real means I agree or that's true. This kind of conversation is packed with C1 level challenges, slang, idioms, phrasal verbs, and cultural context. You can't understand it just by knowing the dictionary definition of the words. You have to understand the context and make inferences. An inference is an educated guess. You use the clues you have to figure out the meaning you don't know. When you're listening to authentic speech, you are constantly making inferences. Your practice for this is simple, but it requires a little bravery. Go somewhere public, a coffee shop, a park, a public transit system, and just listen. Don't stare at people, of course. Just tune your ears to the conversations happening around you. Don't worry if you don't understand everything. The goal is to get comfortable with the chaos of real language. Try to pick out one conversation, Can you figure out the relationship between the speakers? Are they friends, family, co-workers? What is their general mood? Can you guess the topic of their conversation, even if you don't understand every word? This is a powerful exercise in listening for context and making inferences. It's like taking your listening skills to the gym. Now, I want to tell you a story that might seem a bit counterintuitive. It's about how making your language simpler can actually be a sign of advanced fluency. A few years ago, my sister asked me to read a story to my 6-year-old nephew, Leo. I chose one of my favorite books from when I was a kid. It had some beautiful, descriptive language. I started reading. The ancient, majestic oak tree stood sentinel on the precipice of the hill, its gnarled branches reaching for the cerulean sky. Leo just stared at me with a blank expression. I had used too many big words. Majestic, sentinel, precipice, gnarled, cerulean. He was completely lost. I realized my mistake. I put the book down and decided to just tell him the story in my own words. I started again. There was a really, really big old tree. It was standing on the very top of a hill all by itself. Its branches were like twisty, old arms reaching up to the bright blue sky. Leo's face lit up. Like a monster's arms? He asked. Exactly, I said. Like a friendly old monster's arms. For the rest of the story, I used simple words, but I made them come alive. I used my voice to make the sounds of the wind. I used my hands to show how tall the tree was. I changed my voice for the different characters. Leo was completely captivated. He was hanging on every word. I had connected with him, not by using impressive vocabulary, but by using simple language with expressive delivery. This is a skill that many C1 learners overlook. They are so focused on using advanced vocabulary and complex sentence structures that they sometimes forget the most important thing: clarity and connection. True mastery of a language isn't just about being able to use big words. It's about knowing your audience and choosing the right words for them. It's the ability to explain a complex idea in a simple way. Can you explain your job to a child? Can you summarize a difficult article for a friend who hasn't read it? This ability to adapt your language is a hallmark of true fluency. Here's your practice. Pick a topic you know a lot about. It could be your job, your hobby, a scientific concept, anything. Now, imagine you have to explain this topic to 2 different people. First, a colleague in your field, and second, a curious 12-year-old. How would your language change? What vocabulary would you use for your colleague that you would change for the child? What analogies or simple examples would you use for the child? Try to actually say your explanation out loud for both audiences. This exercise forces you to think flexibly about language. It pushes you beyond just knowing the words to understanding how to use them effectively to communicate with different people. Flexibility is also key when you're the one receiving information. Think about trying to learn a new skill from an online video. Last summer, I decided I wanted to learn how to bake sourdough bread. Everyone was doing it, and it looked so rewarding. I found a popular video on YouTube by a baker who was a real expert. The baker started the video by saying, "First, you're going to want to feed your levain. Make sure its hydration is at 100% and let it autolyze for about 30 minutes before you incorporate the salt and begin your bulk ferment." I just stared at my screen. Levain, hydration, autolyze, bulk ferment. It was like he was speaking a different language. I was a confident English speaker, but I was completely lost in this world of technical jargon. I almost gave up, but then I remembered the strategies I'd learned as a language learner. Instead of quitting, I treated it like a listening comprehension exercise. I listened to that first sentence again and I wrote down the words I didn't know: levain, autolyse, bulk, ferment. Then I used context clues. He was talking about making bread, so levain must be another word for the starter. I watched what he did. He mixed flour and water. That must be what hydration was about. Autolyse was the part where he let the mixture sit before adding salt. I became a detective, using the visuals in the video and my existing knowledge to decode the new vocabulary. I had to watch the video several times. I would pause it, replay short sections, and even say the new words out loud to get used to them. Bulk ferment. It was a slow and sometimes frustrating process. But by the end, not only had I learned the steps to make bread, but I had also learned a whole new set of vocabulary. My first loaf of sourdough was not perfect, but I had done it. I had navigated a new, technical area of English. This is a situation C1 learners often face, whether it's starting a new job with its own unique acronyms and jargon, or diving into a new hobby. The key is not to be intimidated. Don't shut down when you hear a word you don't know. Get curious. Ask questions. Paraphrase to check your understanding. You could say, so when you say autolyse, you mean I should just let the flour and water sit for a while before I do anything else. Is that right? This active approach is crucial. Let's practice paraphrasing right now. I'm going to give you a slightly technical sentence. I want you to try and rephrase it in simpler terms, as if you were checking your understanding. Here's the sentence. To optimize performance, we need to leverage our core competencies and sunset the legacy systems that are creating operational drag. How would you paraphrase that? You might say something like, okay, so if I understand correctly, you're saying we should focus on what we're good at and get rid of the old computer systems because they're slowing us down? See how that works? Paraphrasing is a superpower. It ensures you understand, it shows the other person you are listening carefully, and it helps you learn and remember new vocabulary. This skill becomes even more critical in high-stakes situations, like a medical appointment. A friend of mine, Anna, recently had a health scare. She'd been feeling unwell for a while and finally went to see a specialist. Anna's English is excellent, but she was nervous, and the doctor was using a lot of medical terminology. The doctor said, well, the preliminary results from your blood panel indicate some inflammation markers are elevated. We'll need to do a more comprehensive workup to rule out any autoimmune conditions. Anna told me later her heart was pounding. She heard inflammation, rule out, and autoimmune. And her mind started to race with worry. But instead of just nodding, she took a deep breath and advocated for herself. She said, Doctor, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous and I want to make sure I understand. When you say inflammation markers, what does that mean in simple terms? And what kind of autoimmune conditions are you trying to rule out? The doctor's demeanor changed. He slowed down and explained everything in much simpler language. He drew a little diagram to show what he meant. By asking for clarification, Anna took control of the situation. She turned a confusing and scary experience into an informative one. She also practiced another key skill, summarizing. At the end of the appointment, she said, Okay, so just to recap, I need to go for more tests to see what's causing the inflammation, and I shouldn't worry too much until we have those results. Is that correct? The doctor confirmed, and she left the office feeling anxious, yes, but also empowered and clear on the next steps. Communicating in a medical setting is a unique challenge. You have to listen for details, understand complex information, and clearly express your own feelings and symptoms, all while you might be feeling sick or scared. Your practice for this is to prepare. Before you ever go to a doctor, learn the basic vocabulary for your body parts and common symptoms. Practice describing a simple problem, like a headache. How would you describe it? Is it a sharp pain or a dull ache? Is it constant or does it come and go? Being able to use this specific descriptive language is a sign of advanced fluency and can make a huge difference in your healthcare. Now I want to take you on a little trip. A few years ago, 2 of my friends and I decided to take a road trip across part of the United States. We started in Chicago and drove all the way down to New Orleans. For me, it was not just a journey through changing landscapes, but a journey through changing soundscapes. The way people spoke changed with every state we drove through. In Chicago, the accent was what many people consider a standard general American accent, though it has its own unique features. But as we drove south into Kentucky and Tennessee, the music of the language began to change dramatically. The vowels started to stretch out. I became ah. A word like time sounded more like Tom. Short words became longer, and long words became shorter. We stopped at a small diner in rural Tennessee, and the waitress asked us, "Y'all want some sweet tea?" Y'all, that beautiful, efficient contraction of you all, was everywhere. Her accent was like honey, slow and sweet. It was beautiful, but I had to focus my ears in a new way to catch every word. Then we reached New Orleans, Louisiana. The accent there was a whole different world. It was a fascinating mix of Southern American English, French, and other influences. People didn't just have a different accent, they used different words. Instead of a sidewalk, they might say, a banquette. It was amazing. At one point, I asked a man for directions, and his accent was so thick, and he spoke so quickly that I had to ask him to repeat himself 3 times. I felt a little embarrassed, but he was incredibly kind and patient. He slowed down for me, and I finally understood. That road trip was one of the best English lessons of my life. It taught me that there is no single American accent. There are hundreds. From the fast-clipped speech of Boston to the laid-back drawl of Texas, the country is a rich tapestry of dialects. For a C1 learner, this can be incredibly challenging. You might be perfectly comfortable with your teacher's accent or the voices on a national news channel, but then you encounter a strong regional accent and you feel like you're starting all over again. The solution is exposure. You have to intentionally expose yourself to different ways of speaking. Don't just watch Hollywood movies. Watch independent films set in different parts of the country. Don't just listen to national podcasts. Find local radio stations or podcasts from cities like Boston, Atlanta, or Houston. You can find them easily online. At first, it will be difficult. You might only understand 50%. That's okay. Your brain is a powerful pattern recognition machine. The more you expose it to a certain accent, the more it will start to tune in and recognize the new patterns of sound. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for familiarity. The goal is not to sound like you're from Texas. The goal is that when you meet someone from Texas, you can understand them with confidence. My final story is about a business pitch. It's a story about failure and then success. My colleague, Ben, had been working for months on a proposal for a new project. He had to present it to the company's senior leadership team. Ben is extremely smart and detail-oriented. His proposal was flawless. It was full of data, charts, and logical arguments. He had rehearsed his presentation for weeks. The day of the pitch, he stood in front of the executives and delivered his perfectly logical presentation. He went through his slides one by one, explaining the data and the financial projections. The executives listened politely, they nodded, but when he finished, the room was silent. The CEO looked at him and said, "Thank you, Ben. That's a lot of good data. We'll take it under consideration." The project was not approved. Ben was devastated. He couldn't understand what went wrong. A week later, his manager gave him some feedback. "Ben," she said, "they didn't say no to your idea. They said no to your story. You gave them data, but you didn't make them feel anything. You didn't tell them a story." Ben got a second chance to pitch his idea a month later. This time, he did something different. He started not with a chart, but with a story. He told a story about a real customer, let's call her Mrs. Davis. He described her problem, her frustrations, and how the company was failing her. He made the problem personal and emotional. He made the executives feel Mrs. Davis's frustration. Then he introduced his project, but he didn't present it as a set of features and financial projections. He presented it as the solution to Mrs. Davis's problem. He said, "Now, imagine if Mrs. Davis had this tool. Imagine how her experience would change." He painted a picture of a better future. He ended his presentation by saying, "This project isn't just about increasing our profits by 10%. It's about turning customers like Mrs. Davis into our biggest fans." The response was completely different. The executives were leaning forward. They were engaged. They started asking excited questions. The project was approved on the spot. Ben had learned a powerful lesson. At the highest level, communication is not just about logic and data. It's about storytelling. Stories are how we connect with each other. They are how we persuade, inspire, and make ideas memorable. This is a profound skill for any C1 speaker. Can you wrap your ideas in a story? When you are in a job interview and they ask you about your experience, don't just list your duties. Tell them a short story about a challenge you faced and how you overcame it. This is called the STAR method. Situation, task, action, result. It's a simple formula for storytelling in a professional context. When you are trying to persuade your team to try a new approach, don't just show them the data. Tell them a story about what success will look like. Fluency is not just about your ability to speak without errors. It is about your ability to have an impact on your listener. It's about being able to make them see what you see, feel what you feel, and understand what you understand. And there is no more powerful tool for this than a well-told story. So as we come to the end of our time together today, I want you to reflect on all these stories. Michael's job interview, my movie night, the frustrating customer service call, Chloe's comedy routine, the flea market negotiation, the networking event, the dinner party debate, giving feedback to Sam, the difficult lecture, the subway conversations, reading to my nephew, baking sourdough bread, Anna's doctor visit, the cross-country road trip, and Ben's business pitch. Each one holds a key to unlocking the next level of your fluency. The journey to the C2 level, to true mastery, is not a straight line. It's a rich and varied path. It's about developing a new kind of listening, an active, empathetic, and strategic listening. It's about understanding the unspoken rules of conversation, the nuance, the intonation, the rhythm. And it's about finding the confidence not just to speak, but to connect, to persuade, and to tell your own stories. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to ask someone to slow down. Don't be afraid to be the person in the room who doesn't get the joke. And then ask someone to explain it. Every moment of confusion is an opportunity to learn. Every challenging conversation is a chance to grow. Embrace the messiness of real language. Be curious. Be patient with yourself. And most importantly, have fun with it. This is your adventure. Thank you so much for joining me today on English in Advance. I hope you found this journey through stories and strategies helpful and inspiring. If you want to continue improving your English and reaching for true fluency, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. And, very important, hit that bell notification so you never miss a new episode. We have so much more to explore together. Until next time, keep listening, keep speaking, and keep telling your story. My name is Jessica. Goodbye for now.